Gatsby is a React.js website framework. You can think of like Gatsby as Jekyll++. Yeah, we like to call it like a framework because it does much more than kind of a traditional static site generator. It kind of came time to build the website for a startup. I don't want to, to go back to any of those other things that I'd used before. That's kind of where Gatsby came from. I open sourced it and snowballed from there. Just like figure out how to unleash Gatsby on like the really big sites of the world, looking for basically partners, large websites that want to jump into the React Gatsby world.
Hey, this is Brian, and you're listening to JAMstack Radio, a bi-weekly series where we discuss the JAMstack, a new way of building websites and apps that are fast, secure, and simple to work with. JAMstack Radio is brought to you by Heavybit, a program dedicated to helping startups take their developer products to market. For more information, visit heavybit.com. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, or if you'd like to suggest a topic, find us on Twitter at JAMstack Radio. Welcome to another installment of JAMstack Radio. In the house, we got Kyle Matthews.
Hey, glad to be here.
Cool. And Kyle, you are the creator of Gatsby, the React static site generator, correct?
This is correct. This is
cool.
Correct.
Awesome, which is why we have you here. And so I guess we could just start, what is Gatsby?
That's a great place to start. So Gatsby is a React.js website framework.
Okay.
So it lets you build entire websites using React.js, React components, which is awesome.
Cool. And so you said it's a React-based framework, not a static site generator. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can think of it as a static site generator as well. It's kind of a open question, on the branding there so far. Yeah, we like to call it like a framework because it does much more than kind of a traditional static site generator.
Yeah.
And that kind of can confuse
people.
people.
How would it compare to something like, my assumption, I've used Gatsby, so I'm going to play like ignorant advocate.
Yeah.
But how would it compare to something like a Jekyll?
So you can think of like Gatsby as Jekyll++.
Yeah.
Because on one hand, you can take, do exactly what you do with Jekyll, which is, take Markdown and run it through React components and then spit out HTML pages.
Yeah.
And that's pretty straightforward. But what's great about Gatsby is it gives you that, but it also gives you a modern JavaScript and CSS, development environment and production website environment, so that you can do the Markdown, do that stuff, but also do everything you normally do in a React app.
Yeah.
Which I think is really powerful because you can combine kind of the app and website paradigms into one thing, which I think is really important because, in this day and age, the internet's, bigger and like more competitive. And if you're building websites, it's really nice to be able to take advantage of, everything that kind of modern app tools give you.
So at Netlify, we personally use Hugo for our marketing site.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a Gatsby project for internal stuff that we haven't shipped yet, but it's also internal at the moment. And but Hugo, what we do is we inject. My coworker that built the marketing site just injected a bunch of jQuery in there.
Yeah,
because that was the quickest we can get JavaScript on the page.
Yeah,
but also do everything marketing that you would expect you would want to do.
Yeah.
So we could have went the approach of adding React on top of our Hugo framework.
Yeah.
But then that would be just really weird and messy.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
With Gatsby, the way I understand it is that it's React first. That's what's doing all the rendering for you.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Yeah, it's React only.
React only, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what's so great. I mean, if you go straight React, it's a dramatic simplification compared to doing something JavaScript heavy with another framework.
Yeah.
Because with another framework, you have the problem of you have like Hugo or Jekyll templates, but then anything you want to do in the front end, now you also have to maintain the same templates in JavaScript as well.
Yeah.
And you have this duplication, bifurcation of logic and templates, which can get really confusing and complicated to maintain. Where with Gatsby, you just have React components all the time, and that's all you have to worry about. So it feels very simple to add, JavaScript enhancements.
Yeah, which is great for lack of not having to do any context switching. So if your actual app is already a React app and you're doing all that the normal React stuff in there, but then you have to throw together something else. Mm-hmm. Actually, even zooming out, you can actually do your entire app in Gatsby. Is that correct?
Yeah. There's actually people who are building kind of marketing sites combined with their normal application. There's several SaaS companies that everything is Gatsby.
Interesting. Yeah. Because we have some issues having separate repos, having a Hugo like context, and then having a React context. I think we've solved a lot of those, but I think when you have everything is Gatsby, I think like the whole login thing, like you can log into the marketing site, and then it could switch you over to the app site, which would be pretty awesome.
Yeah. And you can like share components then across everything.
Yeah, your style library actually would be shareable as well.
Because I mean, I've worked at like one of the companies I worked at, after a year or so there, the marketing side did this big rebrand, and then all of a sudden the app looked completely different, than the marketing website.
Yeah.
And like that sort of stuff is really common. It's hard to keep everything in sync.
Yeah.
But if you have kind of like a component library and a design system that can work both in like a marketing context and in kind of like the app context, then it's really trivial to kind of keep everything like looking very similar and like feeling very cohesive and moving quickly forward. Because there's also problems, with like marketing is always desperate for engineering resources, but engineers don't want to like jump into whatever the marketing people are using because typically it's some CMS thing that's like ugly and repulsive, and
jQuery mess.
jQuery mess, or been worked on by like a dozen different people in a dozen different contexts and so forth, and it's just like not fun. But if the whole company can use like this common core set of React components, then it's pretty straightforward to keep moving forward quickly.
Yeah, in a previous job, I worked on a Rails app, but our marketing site was WordPress.
Yeah.
And we had a bunch of Rails developers and also JavaScript developers as well, because we ended up going Angular. It was a few years ago. So Angular was pretty hot then. But no one wanted to touch the marketing stuff.
Yeah.
Because you had to, it was like a way different complete context switch between Rails and WordPress, and trying to figure out like, where do I even start?
Yeah.
So can we zoom back out a little bit more about Gatsby? I want to find out where did it come from? Like why did you decide to build a static site generator?
So great question. So a bit about my history. I actually started in programming in college back in the 2000s doing Drupal. That was kind of like my first exposure to programming. Nice. So I was definitely, and I did that really intensively for a few years actually. I went to a bunch of Drupal cons and did a bunch of consulting in college and a bit after around Drupal and so forth. So I was pretty heavily steeped in kind of the CMS website world. And then after college, a few years after college, I worked at Pantheon, which is a company here in San Francisco that does Drupal. They did like Drupal, just Drupal then, and now WordPress as well. They build like really nice developer and like hosting tools. Anyway, so I have a lot of exposure to just like how the world of websites work. And so I had that, and then I at Pantheon I actually transitioned to being just like a straight JavaScript engineer, and built out their web app and did a bunch there. And then after Pantheon, I did a startup. Around that time, like React was getting really big. This was like early 2014, and so I did everything for the startup, like all of our app stuff in React and Webpack and like a few other things, that are now like really common tools. And so anyway, so I fell completely in love with that whole paradigm of having, these really, decoupled atomic components that you could just mix and match together and, have really brilliant reuse patterns. And I was like, this is amazing. I'm so productive. I can like ship things without bugs that are exactly what I want. I can think of something and build it, like super quickly. And I just never had, it just felt like a dramatic improvement over what I was using before, which was, Drupal in the past, and then, Backbone and jQuery at Pantheon. And anyway, so it kind of came time to build the website for our startup. And I was like, I don't want to, to go back to any of those other things that I'd used before. Like, I want to build like a website. And when I said like website, it's like I wanted something that, loaded really fast. So it, you loaded HTML, not like most apps, which you just kind of load like an empty HTML body and then load the JavaScript and then it kind of boots up like that. I wanted to like ship HTML, but build it with React components. So I was like, okay, how do I kind of like blend these two? Like basically, how do I like take React and Webpack and use that to build a static site generator? And anyways, and that's kind of where Gatsby came from. And it was basically just like, it started just like, oh, it'd be cool if this existed, sort of thing. Can I build something like that? Because if it, existed, that'd be great. I would use it. And that was about mostly what I was thinking. But then I open sourced it, and it kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah, and it basically took over your life. So did you have
yeah.
Did you have plans on making this when you open sourced it and said, here's Gatsby thing? Did you have plans on like, oh, this is going to be the thing I want to do and build projects in this form? Or were you just like...
No, I mean, I've been working on the startup then for about almost a year. So, I mean, we were pretty set on making that a success. So it was just, it's like React was early and there's a lot of people just experimenting like, hey, there's this brand new thing. Like, what can it be?
Yeah.
And that was, a way I could contribute to kind of the developing React story. It's like, hey, here's this like way of taking React and like using it in kind of a novel, interesting, potentially valuable way.
Yeah.
And I mean, early in any kind of experiment, it's like I mean, I had an inkling that it could be something pretty significant, but that wasn't the goal. It's like it was just like a cool hack,
Yeah. So I remember I used Gatsby for some small little side projects and like just checking a couple boxes similar to the reason why you built it. It's like, see if this works. And so it seemed much like, oh, cool. There's a lot of things that work together. This is awesome.
Yeah.
And so you recently released 1.0. So that was like a long time coming. And there's a lot of new things in like that are really cool that are built into the 1.0. One being like the plugin system. The other thing being a lot of the PWA, like progressive web app enhancements. So like the offline thing, but like keeping that idea first.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about like some of those things you added in 1.0?
So kind of like carrying on from the story. So when I open sourced it, it was, hey, this would be awesome. But like most hacks, just you're focused on getting to like the first stable point you can find, not necessarily like the global maximum, type thing.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so V0 of Gatsby had a lot of limitations. One of the big ones was it wasn't like a progressive web app in the sense that one of the big things about progressive web apps is that it kind of like progressively boots up, it kind of like pulls in code and content and code and data as necessary to make the app kind of work. But one of the limitations of Gatsby v0 was it just compiled all data and code into one big JavaScript bundle and then loaded that in, which meant that it was pretty limited on the size of site that you could use it for. So that was one of the big limitations that I wanted to address, is that I wanted to have built-in code and data splitting for Gatsby. So no matter how big your site gets, it'll still boot up really quickly. It'll still load really quickly. And then only kind of gradually pull in additional code and data as needed as you kind of like navigate around the site. V0, you have a 10,000 page site and you're like loading in like a megabyte of JavaScript or something like that. Where Gatsby, even if it's like a 10 page site or 10,000 page site, you're still just loading in, 100 or 150 kilobytes of JavaScript. And then as you like click around, it pulls in stuff that's needed.
Yeah.
So that was one of the big things, was just to like make it much more lightweight and scalable. The other couple, like you touched on, like the plugin system. A lot of people talk about like JavaScript fatigue, that it's just like it's hard to set up a really powerful working environment that's like customized to like how you like to do web stuff. And a lot of that is just because configuring, our primary tool these days, Webpack, is kind of a low level, sometimes poorly documented, sometimes really weird experience.
Yeah.
It's like powerful, but it's like a lot of friction to getting to a stable setup. And so the idea of Gatsby plugins is that it abstracts that low level configuration behind, kind of a plugin system. So you can just say, I want SaaS set up correctly to work with Gatsby and Webpack, and you just install it, and then that's it. And then, people who then care about the, and are knowledgeable about how SaaS should work, the best way, then they kind of maintain the actual plugin code. And so anyway, so the Gatsby plugin system is really powerful. It can, do anything to Webpack and like set up Babel plugins and a bunch of other stuff. So it's really kind of fun to see that people who are really new to web development, they can, just add plugins and things just work and they can get going without a lot of effort. Yeah, and so then the last big thing was a new data sourcing and transformation system.
Yeah.
So one of the other big limitations for static site generators is that they only work with files on disk.
Yeah.
So, which is great if you're like a programmer hacker dude, like I want to build everything, with Git and Markdown and files on disk, and I just want to like pull up my text editor and, code away and whatever. But the vast majority of websites don't work that way. You actually have other people who don't sit in the terminal all day, working on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's like, of course, a whole world of tools for, CMSs, generally content management systems of all, flavors for, letting people edit and, create and edit content and so forth. Anyway, so Gatsby's data layer, it lets you integrate Gatsby with basically any data source. So if you have an API, you can write a Gatsby source plugin, which goes to that API and pulls down data and lets you then pull it into pages on your site. Gotcha. And so there's already source plugins for like WordPress, for Drupal, for Firebase. Somebody built one for Lever and Workable, which are two like job kind of management tracking like tools. So anyway, so that they can like for their website, they can like pull down the current list of open jobs.
Yeah. Was there a recent Contentful?
Oh yeah,
plugin?
and then Contentful
I think
has,
I saw that tweet.
Yeah. So Contentful has a really nice plugin as well. Anyways, yeah. So they're pretty easy to write and like they're really powerful. They kind of like recreate all the data from this remote system right in your Gatsby environment. So
and is that exposed in like some sort of like so in Hugo they call them taxonomies or some sort of variable? Is that if you use the plugin, is it exposed in like a Contentful or a Gatsby data?
One kind of interesting constraint / advantage of Gatsby is because any code you write for Gatsby runs on both, during the build process, but then also runs in the client, which means that, so like Hugo and Jekyll and other places, in all your templates, you have access to all your data. It's just kind of like, basically they just collect all your data and like, boom, stick it into the template and like, here's everything, do whatever you want. And with Gatsby, that doesn't work because whatever data you put into a React component also has to be shipped into the client to be available there because it's like running the exact same thing on both, at build time and also when it gets loaded into the browser, or the smartphone or whatever, wherever the site's running.
Yeah.
And so because of that, we have kind of, anyways, a different like way of pulling data into components. And we use something called GraphQL.
Yeah.
And GraphQL is it's a query language, sort of similar to like SQL. So Gatsby uses GraphQL to query whatever data your source plugins bring in.
Yeah.
So if you have a Contentful source plugin, then you can query the different content types that you're pulling in from Contentful. So you can have, a post type and a product type and, upcoming events type. And then those will be automatically turned into a GraphQL schema. And then you can just write, like say you have a page with, sidebar with like a list of upcoming events. You can have a React component, which in that React component has a query for, a list like the next 5 upcoming events, sorted by their date. And then you can query some other fields, like the location and this, that, and the other thing. And then really easily turn that then into a component, which you can then drop, anywhere on the site.
I haven't messed around with any of the GraphQL stuff yet for Gatsby. I've been intrigued enough to eventually get there. Just have to get the framework. I'm trying to build we have a marketing team at Netfly.
Okay.
And we have a lot of notifications that need to be not maintained. People just need to be updated on like what is the status of this, what's the status of that.
Yeah.
So as I build an internal tool, and I wanted to use Gatsby because why not? And to be able to provide like a list or a stream of data to show off and stuff like that. So the data will be sourced from multiple places, GitHub and probably Slack, I think. I'm not sure. Yeah. I haven't thought through it because we don't really have or Trello is another one that we also use.
We need source plugins for all those. So
I'm really intrigued. So your plugins, so is it like similar to like Webpack plugins? Like you just kind of follow the structure and it's just a bit of JavaScript that you have to piecemeal together between different APIs? So
each plugin can take options.
Yeah.
So typically, if you're connecting to a remote API, you need some sort of access key or access token.
Yep.
So the plugin, it just like takes that from the options that the user passes in, and then it just does an API call. Sometimes APIs will have like client libraries which will kind of smooth the process, or other times you'll just get a HTTP library for Node.js and issue a call to like pull in stuff. And then it's just kind of up to the source plugin to Gatsby-ize the data.
Yeah.
And how Gatsby thinks about data is in the terms of, like, we just call them nodes. So just like individual chunks of data.
Yeah.
And so typically, it'd be, so I'd say WordPress, you have like posts and pages. The WordPress source plugin, it takes each post and turns that into a Gatsby node. You have a few required fields like, ID, and then like a type, and then you just then add all the rest of the data that's like applicable to that field.
Yeah.
And then and that's basically all you do. You just say there's a Gatsby function called create node, and you pass in the data and you just create all your nodes using that. And then Gatsby then kind of stores all that data and then uses that to infer the schema. Anyways, it's storing the data, it creates the schema, and then you can run queries against that schema, which then pull out data from the store. So it's from an implementation, like a source plugin implementation standpoint, it's really straightforward because all you have to do is say, hey Gatsby, here's data, and then Gatsby handles the rest of it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it sounds like a fun weekend project. You're still using, Kyle, you're still using Webpack as part of your build system as well?
Everything other than the data layer. The data layer is like its own independent system.
Yeah.
But Webpack handles all of the CSS and JavaScript processing.
Okay, cool. And that's not abstracted away. Like if I wanted to add things in my Webpack, do I go there or do I reach for a Gatsby plugin?
Gatsby plugin is advised because typically they've had a lot of attention to make sure that they're correct and so forth. And also it's nice because then you're abstracted away from Webpack version changes.
Yeah.
So we're getting fairly close to upgrading to Webpack 3. That'll be the next major release of Gatsby.
Yeah.
And if you've directly reached in and manipulated the Webpack configuration, then it's up to you to like update that for Webpack 3, which could involve some serious pain.
Yeah.
Maybe. But if you're just using a plugin, then it'll be upgraded for you and you don't have to worry about it. So
okay, very cool. Yeah, I'll keep that in mind. I know I got that call out when we were at React Rally. I built a template for Gatsby.
Yeah.
And we used style components, but we didn't use the actual Gatsby plugin.
Yeah.
So noted.
Yeah. So that's and that's the cool thing about plugins, that like there's all sorts of potential optimizations that can be done for different things. And so the plugins are great because they kind of hide that complexity from you. And
some of the maintainers, they're doing some refreshes on their React docs.
Oh yeah.
And it seems like they're using Gatsby for it.
Yeah.
So have you been involved in that conversation or those efforts?
So Brian Vaughn on the React core team at Facebook, he's been leading up that effort. And anyways, we've been friends for a while, so I've been helping out with that and making sure, anyways, Gatsby v1 is still new enough that any significant project is probably going to run into bugs / missing pieces. And anyway, so I've been helping, smooth over that and make sure that, things work.
We wrote some code because they're hosting it on Netlify at the moment. So we wrote some code to help support them. So we've been well aware of that happening, but it's nice to see that they're getting closer and closer to making that switch.
Yeah, it's pretty close. I think the idea is to launch that along with React 16.
Exciting.
Of course, we'll all know while you're listening to this, since I guess React 16 will be out by the time this
It'll
is
be out, and you're probably looking at a Gatsby page in the React docs.
Yeah.
So it's all going to be fun.
You'll be like, this is so amazing. It's so fast. And
awesome. So what's next for Gatsby? Now you have 1.0. You mentioned Webpack 3 is going to be, so 2.0 is going to be Webpack 3. Are you going to make that as a breaking change?
Yeah. So that's the main thing. We'll also upgrade React 16 and Babel 7 as part of that. That's probably most of what we'll try to tackle in that upgrade. And the community members actually done a lot of the work on the Webpack 3 upgrade. So I just need to carve out some time soon to focus on that. And then so that's that's Gatsby 2, and then Gatsby 3 is starting to think more seriously about that. In Gatsby 3, the plan is to focus on scalability.
Okay.
Because Gatsby v1 was a big bump to our scalability. Like V0, if you got past a few hundred pages, like you're in trouble. And like V1, you can comfortably get to 1,000, 2,000. I mean, it's getting increasingly painful, and somewhere around 5,000, 6,000, maybe it just kind of starts to crap out. But Gatsby's always been designed that it can scale to essentially any number of pages.
Yeah.
Anyways, I thought a ton about it just when I was working on V1. And anyway, so I want to start tackling that problem as well. Just like figure out how to unleash
Yeah.
Gatsby on like the really big sites of the world. Because it'd be awesome to have, sites of 100,000 pages, million pages running Gatsby.
Yeah, that'd be
happily.
a really interesting case study / like I'd love to watch that release notes as they get closer to beta.
Yeah. So looking for kind of basically partners, I guess. Cool. Large websites that want to jump into kind of the React Gatsby world.
Yeah. For perspective, do you know how many pages of Facebook React docs are?
I would guess a few hundred.
A few hundred?
Yeah.
Okay.
One I'm more familiar with, like Gatsby.js is up to like 170, 180 or whatever. And it also does a lot of image processing. And so that takes like from a cold cache, it takes like a minute and 20 seconds or something to do image processing, CSS and JavaScript and, all the processing of Markdown and so on and so forth. And then from warm cache, it's like 45 seconds or so forth. It should be possible to make kind of like, anyway, much more scalable. That's kind of like an upper bound for whatever the size of the site. Just through adding in better caching and the ability to like parallelize builds.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think we just about covered, unless there's anything else you wanted to add in there. I know you guys are open source, so you're probably really appreciative of PRs, issues, et cetera, et cetera.
No, totally, yeah. It's been really phenomenal to see just the growth of the community since V1 was launched. Like, I just actually published a new blog post earlier about kind of the growth of the community since V1 launched. And I was just counting some numbers. So there's been 110 new contributors in like the last 77 days, so a bit over 2 months. And there's been like 400 merge PRs in that time as well.
Wow. And you're the one reviewing them all, or do you have anybody else helping you out as like some sort of a help maintainer?
There's a few other people, but I think I'm doing most of it right now.
Okay.
But I mean, it takes a while to groom new maintainers, if you will.
Yeah.
And they have to have enough experience with different parts of the code base.
Yeah.
Plus, they have to have like they have to have enough time, I guess, to jump to it and so forth. So, so far it's been me, but mostly me. But there's definitely some community members who are starting to contribute more and more, kind of like maintainer type stuff.
Yeah.
And people are like contributing in deeper and deeper ways, which is really great to see.
Yeah, which is good, and it's going to set you up nicely to get that 1,000-page website.
Yeah. People, when choosing tools, they really love general tools. They just want, this is my Swiss Army's knife. It can do anything that I need it to. It's like always like this comfortable, familiar tool that can perform well in lots of situations. And so for Gatsby to get to that point, it just has to have, gazillions of contributors that have like exercised it in every possible situation so that, there's not like this blessed path that if you stay in there, it's comfortable and works well and it's not bugs, but you step off it and then like, well, hey, like, why'd you step off it? I mean, we only care about this sort of thing,
Yeah.
So I want Gatsby to be kind of that general purpose tool.
Yeah, cool. Hopefully I'll get it inside Netlify, and I'll start being able to
Then like a virus cell.
Yeah, Netlify myself, and I'll be able to hopefully get a plugin or two out of the way. So
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
You'll see me around.
Yeah, looking forward to your PRs.
Cool. And so that's the conversation, and I kind of want to transition us to jam picks. So You're familiar. Anything you're jamming on, things that are getting you going.
So I thought I'd pick some music albums I've been really enjoying lately. I listen to a lot of music. So I switched to Spotify a few years ago, and whenever you make kind of like a major music platform change, you just lose music for a while. But it's kind of fun though, because eventually you run across them again and you're like, oh yeah, I used to listen to that in college when I was like, had CDs and stuff. Or whatever.
What are CDs?
I can't really remember. They're like circular and they smell funny if you put them in the microwave. That's the main things I remember now. But anyway, CDs, yeah. So so two that I recently rediscovered are RJD2, Dead Ringer. RJD2 is the band or album. Anyways, Dead Ringer's the album, and it's kind of like early-ish electronic, music. It was pretty innovative, and anyways, it still holds up super well. 10, 15 years later. And then another one that I ran across again. This one's actually really old, but I discovered it like 10 years ago. But it's from 60s, 70s. Anyways, Crosby, Stills and Nash.
Okay.
They're kind of named.
I've heard the name of that. I don't think I can't name a song.
Yeah. Another one I really been enjoying recently, Lord's new album, Melodrama.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah. I really liked her first album, but this one's feels like a big step forward. Just kind of maturity of her songwriting. She's a very adept songwriter. Those are my jam picks.
Cool. Awesome. I got some stuff to listen to. So my picks actually, these are going to sound like polar opposites. So one thing I love this new, I don't even know if it's new. It's country music, but it's like country music as if it was like 40 years ago.
Oh, okay.
I think they call it alt country.
Yeah.
So Sturgill Simpson is a guy I've been listening to a lot.
Okay.
And I can't pick an actual song. I use Spotify as well, so I'll just put in follow that artist and just play them while I'm on the train. So he's just a guy I just love listening to. I think I like country, but I don't like name brand country. I like this weird underground indie country thing that's going on right now.
Yeah, that sounds more. I don't know. My little sister likes country, and whenever I'm listening to it, I'm not.
Yeah, I come from the South, but I'm not a big fan of like proper Florida Georgia line bro country, whatever. I'm not into that. Yeah. But Sturgill Simpson, so check that out. Okay. And then there's this other artist who, not even sure if she's an artist. Well, she's an artist. She has a song out. Her name's Cardi B. So it's like Bacardi, but Cardi B.
Okay.
And she's an interesting person where she's more Instagram famous than she is singer famous. And so she used to be a stripper, and then she became an Instagram model, which whatever that is, it's just people who take pictures of themselves and put up there. So they get a lot of
I've missed
following.
the boat on Instagram. So
yeah, and so then I guess she was at a photo shoot and someone was listening to her yell at somebody on the phone, and they figured out the cadence that she was yelling in was actually really good for rap. So now she's a rapper. So she's very much in the Nicki Minaj vein.
Yeah.
But she's got this song, which is Bodak Yellow, and that's her hit. So it's real. I think her story is more interesting than the actual song itself, but the song's actually pretty good if you're into that sort of style. So check out Cardi B. I think she's gonna be the next Kim Kardashian, or I don't know. She might be in the reality space. I'm not even sure.
Yeah.
She just came out of nowhere. I just kept hearing her name, and I finally listened to the song. And I was like, oh, that's her.
Yeah, I find it really interesting. Yeah, how celebrities these days are so easily morph from category to category now.
Well,
there's no boundaries. They're just I'm famous, and you can kind of jump anywhere.
Yeah. So the philosopher Snoop Dogg, his saying is "Get in where you fit in." So
yeah.
That's pretty much where it is, and I think he's also been a really good testament to that. On top of that, I do want to mention GraphQL as one of my picks. If you haven't tried it, I think you should really check it out. As I mentioned before, I will be talking at GraphQL Summit on some of the stuff I've been doing at Netlify for GraphQL, and so it's gonna be a short lightning talk, but it's gonna be a lot of fun. It'll probably be out by the time this comes out. So just check it out. Google it. Google my name. And Kyle, thanks for coming in the Heavybit studio and talking about Gatsby with us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Awesome. So yeah, that's it. And keep spreading the jam.
Will do.
Awesome.
That's all the time we have for today. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, or if you'd like to suggest a topic, find us on Twitter at JAMstack Radio. To learn more about Heavybit, visit heavybit.com. And while you're there, check out their library. It's packed with amazing talks on sales, marketing, product, and general management from founders of developer tools companies and other industry leaders.